I thought you did.
Thank you.
Okay. So, as I said in the beginning, we will try today to discuss affirmative therapy in combination with Gestalt and focus on gender identity and expression. I'm going to start with some basic terminology. Terminology in affirmative therapy, it has a lot of information. Imagine that in the Greek focusing center that we were doing the 1-year training in affirmative therapy. It took us about a weekend to complete the terminology only. But I'm going to discuss only the basics today, the ones that we need for this specific presentation. And of course, if you have any term or a word that is unknown to you, we can, of course, analyze it and discuss it. So, we are starting with the sex assigned at birth, which is primarily, as we know, based on physical anatomy. So it's different than gender. It's different than how some people identify themselves, and it's different than self-determination. It's different than gender identity, which is how do I experience my gender? How do I feel my gender? Which is something which is deeply felt, internal, and an individual experience, and cannot be determined by outside forces. So, together with gender identity, we have the gender expression. How do I express my gender? That can be close to the gender norms or totally outside the gender norms. One very good example that I usually tend to discuss is Annie Lennox. Annie Lennox, as we know from her interviews, is a cisgender heterosexual person. It's a woman who is attracted to men. Okay. So Annie Lennox, during the 80s, her appearance was against the gender norms. She was wearing tuxedos that were considered male presenting, and she had her hair very short, which was against the gender norms at the time. So what I'm trying to say is that gender norms and binaries do not apply only to trans, queer, and non-binary people. Of course, they apply to binary people also. So, cisgender is the person whose gender identity corresponds with a sex assigned at birth. So, if you are assigned as a woman, you feel as a woman. If you're assigned as a man, you feel as a man. It is exactly the opposite of transgender. Cisgender means from the same side. Transgender means from the other side. Okay, it comes from Latin. So, any person whose gender identity differs from the sex assigned at birth can be trans, which is an umbrella term that can cover and diverse gender identities as an experience as non-binary, genderqueer, fluid, and all the identities that do not fit the gender binary. Gender affirmative care, it's an interdisciplinary approach that comes to support a person's self-identified gender through psychological, legal, and medical affirmation when needed and appropriate. And of course, we couldn't do this discussion without mentioning intersex people, which are people with natural variations in sex characteristics, such as chromosomes, hormones, gonads, or anatomy, that do not fit the typical binary definitions of male and female. So we have gender identity that has to do with self-determination and gender expression, and we have the sex assigned at birth, and we have people that are intersex, and we talk about sex characteristics like chromosomes, hormones, and gonads. So we are talking about biology and not identity. Okay. All gender identity expression and sex characteristics, we should understand that are different. Okay. So this is just a basic terminology. Any question that you have, you can send also in the chat. I'm going to check the chat. Please, Sukriti, because I cannot see everybody, if a question arises or anybody needs anything, please inform me. So, what is affirmative care? Here you see in the picture an openly trans man. And I'm saying openly because we do not out people. We do not out people's gender identity. He was part of our group in the Greek Transgender Support Association. And this picture is from an outreach that we did concerning trans rights. So, what is gender affirmative care? Refers to psychological, medical, and social practices that affirm a person's self-identified gender without pathologizing it, and recognizes gender diversity as a natural part of human diversity. It's always based on self-determination by respecting autonomy, agency, and informed decision-making. It promotes health and well-being through dignity, resilience, safety, and social inclusion. Of course, this is exactly what we do in psychotherapy, but this is specific to gender identities, expressions, and characteristics. Almost the same applies to neurodiversity, to neurodiverse affirmative therapy. But this is a whole other workshop that we need to do. But affirmative care also includes neurodiverse people. So, some of the key principles in affirmative therapy, affirmative care, you can call it with different, in different ways. The picture you see here is from the Greek Transgender Support Association. We are gathering food and medicines for trans people that are in need and couldn't have any access at the time, mostly older trans sex workers that were facing huge exclusion and difficulties in surviving. We understand distress contextually, as Gestalt is doing, addressing the effects of stigma, discrimination, minority stress, and social transphobia, rather than viewing gender diversity itself as the source of distress. For many years, we were talking about gender identity disorder. So the person had a disorder. Then we understood by working a lot with trans people that there is no disorder in gender identity. And I will explain afterwards how this is evidence-based and supported. That's why we managed to remove gender identity disorder from the DSM and afterwards transform it to gender dysphoria and now to gender incongruence. Gender incongruence is listed in the ICD EDECA 11 beta as a condition that might require medical support, okay, and not a disorder. It's not listed anymore in the mental disorders. So we need to recognize intersectionality, how race, disability, class, age, migration status culture, sexual orientation, and any other lived experience or status affects a person's life. Intersectionality, it's very, very important because the more the intersectional statuses and identities, usually the more the discrimination and exclusion. For example, a Black trans sex worker refugee, because of intersectional identities, faces exclusion, specifically in the Greek community, and of course now with what's going on in the United States and the UK. And of course, practice trauma-informed care, recognize the high prevalence of trauma, violence, marginalization, and exclusion experienced by many trans and gender diverse people. So, affirmative care in healthcare, hormone therapy, surgeries when desired, support during social, medical, legal transition, access to sexual, reproductive, and mental health, correct name and pronouns in all services. In psychotherapy, inclusive, not assumptive language, do not question the legitimacy of a person's gender identity, affirms rather than tests gender identity, explores identity, development, relationship, trauma, and transitions without reducing the person to their gender history. And there is an ethical basis, and that the therapist is educated in trans-specific issues, including legal rights, medical options, and social challenges. Unfortunately, there is lack of training in LGBT issues, specifically in gender identity, expression, and sex characteristics. The levels of conversion practices are very, very high. In Greece, we are #1 right now in Europe in conversion practices, which is horrible. But I'm going to discuss this a little bit later. So, international organizations that support gender-affirming care with explicit guidelines. Of course, the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, WPATH. Now the WPATH is sued by Donald Trump's administration, so they're in a legal battle. The American Psychological Association, the British Society, and the ABA Division 29. And we have the organizations supporting affirming care, like WHO, American Psychiatric Association. There are a lot of associations here in the United States. I don't know what's going to happen now with this association with the Trump administration, but up till now, they were supporting affirming care. The United Nations and the Office of the United Nations, the High Commissioner of Human Rights, and the Council of Europe. In the Council of Europe, we have the SOGI unit. I have participated in consultations for many years in the SOGI unit, Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity Unit, which deals with issues of affirmative care. So, what is going on with different scientific perspective? Biology. Biological sex is complex and a multidimensional construct. Contemporary biology recognizes that natural variations exist. Biology is not binary. Social anthropology, we will talk about that more in depth. Across cultures and throughout history, many societies have acknowledged that there are more than two genders. Sociology, gender is understood as a social institution shaped through socialization, norms, language, powerful structures, and interpersonal relationships. Gender expectations vary across cultures and historical periods. Also the same with contemporary medicine that understands that the existence of gender diverse identities, and we need evidence-based care. And we will discuss, of course, for psychiatry and psychology that have removed transgender identity from mental disorders. and this is recent, unfortunately. So, homosexuality was also a disorder. I remind you, homosexual people were tortured with conversion practices, and this is happening now more to trans people and not to homosexual people. So, gender diversity before colonization. Gender binary started to be imposed by colonization. So I have here the indigenous culture in North America recognized more than two gender roles. So we have here the names. These are the names of the people and the names of the tribes. Okay, that did recognize more than two genders. Two-spirit, which is a term which is more well-known, is a new term. It's not the historical names that were used by nations. Okay, and non-US, like Samoa people, Zapotec in Mexico, in South Asia, the Hydras, the Muxes, all of this, the Mahu in Hawaii, and we also had a group of people in Albania, in the Balkans, that were actually had the appearance of trans men. Gender identity and expression of trans men. There were females assigned at birth. Okay, so this is the gender diversity before colonization. And in the colonization, we had the imposition of the gender binary, especially the European colonization. Christian missionaries and colonial authorities introduced a rigid male and female binary. And they treated the people as sinful, immoral, unnatural. Okay. Christianization, colonial laws, forced assimilation, with residential boarding schools, and of course, genocide. So, this history reminds us that assumptions of gender are not culturally neutral, but they have been shaped by colonial processes. And the key message that I want to give here is that the binary model of gender was not universally shaped across human societies. In many indigenous cultures, it became dominant through colonization rather than historical universality. And I think this continues. It hasn't stopped. It continues.
Oh, Parvy, I just
So,
wanted to say we're not able to see you. I don't know if that's on purpose. So.
No, that wasn't on purpose. I don't know how this happened. Okay. I have no idea how this happened. So, any comment on what has been said until now? You need something to share? My training is more on affirmative care, not decolonizing psychotherapy, because I know that there are some people in the group that are more trained and have experience than me. That's why I'm opening this question also, but for anything else. But for me, it's impossible to talk about gender without mentioning this history of gender.
I can say something.
Yes.
You know, westernized thinking and academia, which is, I guess, I don't know which comes first, academic thinking or Western ideas of intelligence and what's things like linear thinking. those are very left brain, very linear, very like, thinking that seems to err on the side of evidence and logic and stuff like that. And indigenous thought, however, on the other side is really seems to be focused on, I guess, what can be described as more right brain thinking, where the world is understood through more a spiritual lens, and bears a lot of similarities to Gestalt thinking, actually, and understanding what appears in the here and now is really kind of integral to indigenous ways of understanding. And so decolonial practice and looking at the world through a decolonized lens, I just want to say that I'm glad that it came up in the conversation, because I think it's very important. It's an imperative for like deconstructing the academic model of how, things like the DSM and all these things, and how they pathologize they pathologize people as opposed to pathologizing the system, which is like Western forms of education and stuff like that. So that's all I just wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Saga Warrior. I don't want to say your name. I don't know if you want to say it. That's why I use the name that you have.
That's my name too, but
yeah,
but people also know me as Sheldon as well. That's the name my mother gave me. Saga Warrior is the name I gave myself.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sheldon. Thank you very much. We will have time to discuss afterwards, and I do agree so much with Sheldon. Our brain is it's colonialized. We have to decolonize our whole brain and the way that we exist in the world and the way that we understand science and psychotherapy and medicine. Right now, I am registered in a course of psychedelic therapy, which is extremely, extremely interesting. And what they're actually doing is that they are trying to make an evidence-based observations on what indigenous people were doing from the beginning of time. And this is where the future of psychotherapy and psychiatry is. And in order to understand as much as we can, because gender is a huge spectrum, a little bit to touch upon the idea of gender, my view is that we don't have to move forward, and we do not have to stay in the present. We have to understand what's going on in the present, but it's good to go back in the past and learn from knowledge that is already there for many, many years without pathologization. So we need to decolonize psychotherapy, psychiatry, medicine. Contemporary affirmative practice increasingly recognizes all the dominant assumptions about sex and gender. We question universal assumption. We recognize the cultural understanding of gender diversity. And we examine how colonialism continues to shape psychological theory and clinical practice, creating space for diverse ways of knowing. An affirmative and Gestalt-informed practice invites therapists to remain aware of cultural, historical, and political fields that shape the client's lived experiences. So this is very, very important for gender. So what is going on with Gestalt therapy and affirmative practice? Is there a conceptual convergence? So We know that the core of Gestalt therapy is to enhance self-awareness, freedom, direction. We need to see the individual as a whole, and we cannot be understood without appreciating the whole in the here and now and the past and the current relationships and situations. So, why Gestalt therapy? Because Gestalt therapy is specifically positioned well to work affirmatively with gender diverse clients. Gestalt therapy is non-directive. Gestalt does not begin with diagnosis or explanation. It's grounded in phenomenology, dialogue, field theory, embodiment, organism regulation. You know these things, okay? So there are a lot of conceptual convergences with affirmative therapy. Recently, I was part of a book which is called Queering Gestalt Therapy by Ayan Anmal and John Gillespie and Vikram Kormaskov. I can't pronounce, sorry, by Routledge. And in this Queering Gestalt Therapy book, I have contributed one chapter, but there are wonderful colleagues that have contributed chapters in this book. We challenge the fixed categories, the rigid identities, and the imposed ways of being. Today, contemporary Gestalt should, I don't know if it does, but it would be good to continue this tradition by questioning heteronormativity, cisnormativity, binary assumptions, and power and privilege in the therapeutic field. Unfortunately, because psychotherapy still suffers from heteronormative and cisnormativity. And that's why we have so high rates of conversion practices and therapies. This is my new book. It's called Genders, Forms and Transformations. Unfortunately, right now it's only in Greek. It's a combination with Gestalt and focusing. Hopefully, we will manage to translate it in the future in English. So, a little bit of Gestalt now. Field theory and minority stress. We know, and Billy Desmond in 2016 extends the Gestalt perspective, arguing that homophobia is better understood in a field than in an exclusively intrapsychic process. Not only the disorder of the person, but the disorders of the field, of the culture, okay? And what Billy Desmond here proposes, it's very close to affirmative practice, not only in sexual orientation, but also gender identity and expression. The phenomenological attitude closely parallels affirmative practice, which privileges the client's subjective experience of gender over externally imposed interpretations. So phenomenology in Gestalt and affirmative practice can be very closely understood. We have Rebecca Weltitz here that presents the idea that phenomenological exploration and embodied experimentation provide a therapeutic framework that supports gender exploration without imposing predetermined conclusions. Okay. Affirmative therapy is non-directive. Affirmative therapy doesn't mean I push you to do any type of transition. These are ideas that have nothing to do with affirmative therapy. I've been working with trans people for 16 years. I have seen more than 380 trans people. And I can assure you that a lot of them did not transition. Or they only did a social transition, or they only did a legal transition. Some of them, of course, did a medical transition, and we supported all of them, those who transitioned and those who didn't. exactly because affirmative care is non-directive. We don't direct people to transition. We don't direct people not to transition. We support them in the field to understand what they need in terms of their gender identity and expression and characteristics. There is a huge myth that affirmative therapy pushes people to transition. We do not do that. So, embodiment. I do not use the term gender dysphoria. I have fought a lot to dismantle this term, but I'm going to use it for understanding in this presentation. For people that have dysphoric parts with their body, they feel some like the breasts or the genitals or whatever part of the body that feels dysphoric. Being able to work with the body in a way that is non-directive and it is trauma-informed and does not impose predisposed ideas, it's very, very important because a lot of psychotherapists do not include the body. And in a lot of cases, dysphoria happens in the body, okay? So that's why I found Gestalt therapy as very, very helpful. And of course, any other type of body psychotherapy. We're talking about queer embodiment, not only embodiment, the ability to embody our queerness and our identities. So, affirmative practice facilitates self-discovery rather than identity correction. Within an affirmative framework, self-determination has to do with the individual capacity to recognize and articulate their own gendered experience rather than directing identity development. We know that in a lot of cases, the polarity of gender identity and the sex that is assigned at birth are in a lot of cases in conflict. So this conflict of this polarity disrupts the organic self-regulation of the person. And we need to provide a safe space for this self-regulation to reappear. So, dialogue, another Gestalt practice which is very, very important, and it's also important in affirmative therapy because affirmation emerges through the quality of the therapeutic relationship and not through specific interventions. So, it's important for gender diverse clients not to get misgendered, not to get dead named, not to invalidate their experience. This happens every day in our everyday lives. Okay, I identify as a queer person. I am bisexual or pansexual. I do not feel that my gender is binary. I never did. Okay, and to go to a psychotherapist that has the predetermined idea that I have to feel as a man or as a woman or as whatever binary idea is, of course, imposed and not affirming. And also in experiments, we need to facilitate awareness and not identity correction. And we do not push the result of the experiment, okay? We do not experiment with preconceived ideas. We allow the person to freely experiment with their self, with the gender, and the same happens with creative adjustment. I'm going to move a little bit here. So I created this little table here to see how affirmative principle and Gestalt principle can connect. Phenomenology with self-determination, field theory with minority stress, organismic self-regulation with autonomy, dialogue with affirmation, contact with relational safety, and creative adjustment with resilience. The clinical implications is recognition and growth. If we follow these principles, that can be very well combined with the Gestalt principles. I don't want to tire you with a lot of information, and I'm very, very eager to move to the discussion. So I will say a few things more, and then you will have the space for discussion, questions, or whatever you need to introduce. So I will mention very, very fast this concept. I will not go into this concept a lot right now because I prefer to have a dialogue with you than presenting. But I want to present you a concept that came up through my theoretical framework and introduce a clinical concept that emerged with my transgender and gender diverse clients. And it's assigned gender at birth as introjection. And in a lot of cases, I have people that are cis, that they are feeling that they are self-identifying and self-determining their gender as it was assigned at birth, telling me, wait, my gender is not an introjection. Yes, of course it's not. Because for cisgender people, for people that do understand the gender that they feel that they are, that they self-determinate as the gender that they were assigned at birth, it's not an introjection. But for people who are trans, queer, non-binary, the assigned gender at birth, the imposed gender, can work as an introjection. Because usually they are pressured from the family, from the school, from the government to act as the gender that were assigned at birth and to feel as the gender that they were assigned at birth. So we are doing a lot of work to dismantle this introjection. And the difference is, there's a huge difference that for cis people, in a lot of cases, the society dictates how the gender should be, how a man should be, how a woman should be, how should they act, how should they dress. But for non-cis people, trans, non-binary, queer, it's not the how, it's the who you are, what you should be, what gender we should be. This is the difference. And that comes to the core of the person's identity. Okay? And not the gender, just the gender stereotypes. So we know that in Gestalt therapy, whatever is imposed on the organism and not assimilated can be approached as a defense mechanism and specifically as an introjection. That's why we can see that for a lot of trans people, the gender assigned at birth, the sex assigned at birth, can work as an introjection. That is never, of course, assimilated because it's totally opposite of the organismic self-regulation of the person. So we have a gender assigned arbitrarily based on biological and anatomical characteristics. We have a lot of intersex people that were assigned a chosen gender at birth, and through violent operations as babies, they were choosing their biological sex was chosen by doctors and the family, and in a lot of cases without the knowledge of the family. And these people grow up and understand that the gender that they feel has nothing to do with the one that was surgically imposed on them, which is of course recognized as torture. Okay. So this is another way to arbitrarily choose the gender of a person. You see XXY and you say, two X's, it's probably a woman. So let's torture the person. Let's do operations and torture them to choose the gender because they're not going to fit in society. But this is an arbitrary choice. And we see in trans people that the choice is arbitrary, even if we have the more common chromosomes like XY and XX. But we know that there are more than 30 combinations of intersex characteristics, and this has to do with biology. And all these combinations create 1,000 different genders, biology, and expressions. So I will pass through this. I don't want to burden you with that. So the imposed gender as introjection, we have the gender assigned at birth vs self-determination, societal expectation vs individual experiences, cultural norms vs personal choice of expression. When I say choice, I mean expression and not identity. Identity cannot be chosen, but expression can be chosen. As homosexuality and sexual orientation cannot be chosen. So you can see that the pressure to conform to binary notions is against embracing a spectrum of gender identities. So I have a lot of information here, but I will pass them in order for us to have a discussion. But before that, I want to discuss conversion practices. As I said, in Greece, we are #1 right now in Europe in conversion practices. And you need to understand that contemporary conversion practices are not always explicit. It's not always torture. It's not always practices that can be very easily identified. They do not always seek to change a person's gender identity, orientation, sexual orientation, or characteristics. Instead, they emerge through subtle therapeutic processes that systematically undermine, delay, or invalidate a person's self-identified gender or sexual orientation. Okay. Also, examples may include presuming that gender diversity might always be explained by trauma. We had in the past, in the 60s and the 70s, you were raped, that's why you became homosexual. These very, very dangerous myths. We have these myths now for gender identity. Framing cisgender identity as the preferred or expected outcome. This is the normal, okay? But normal does not exist. Common exists. Requiring that individuals repeatedly justify or prove their gender identity. Persistent misgendering or refusal to use affirmed names and pronouns. Presenting gender diversity primarily as confusion, psychopathology, or developmental failure. Prolonging exploration with the implicit goal of discouraging social or medical transition. So, from Gestalt ethical practice, we discuss concepts that has to do with our lives. It has to do with our bodily autonomy. It has to do with our self-determination and respect. They have direct ethical implications for psychotherapy. So, Gestalt therapy is a therapy that is grounded in phenomenology and dialogue and field theory. It respects organic self-regulation, and it's a therapeutic practice that does not impose predetermined outcomes. So I think it's very, very close to affirmative practices. And these are some final recommendations that you can choose to follow or not. Okay, that's why they are recommendations and not impositions. To affirm each person's self-identified gender with respect and dignity. To create a safe, inclusive, and not judgmental therapeutic environment. Support self-determination and autonomy. Use affirming and inclusive language. Recognize the impact of stigma, intersectionality, as we said, discrimination and minority stress on mental health. Avoid pathologizing gender diversity or making assumptions about identity. Engage in ongoing education, self-reflection, and cultural humility. Advocate for equitable, accessible, and affirming mental health care. So I hope that was not too tiring for you. I hope it was interesting. Gestalt therapy has always invited us to meet people as they are, not as we want them to be, and we expect them to be, where they are, as a whole, without judgment. Perhaps the contribution of affirmative practice is not to change Gestalt therapy, but to remind us of our deepest ethical commitment, which is phenomenological openness, respect for self-determination and relational dialogue, awareness of the field, and commitment to human dignity. I'm closing here now with some pictures. These are for some pictures from the Greek Transgender Support Association that we did some outreach about how transphobia kills and how we need to break the silence. And these are mostly trans sex workers, trans women sex workers that participated in this campaign. And this is from the presentation of our book that happened just 2 weeks ago. This is Kagella Tromokratis, a very, very well-known drag artist that helped me in the presentation of the book. So thank you very much for taking the time to hear me, and now I really want to hear from you and to discuss and to engage in dialogue. Didre, I see your hand.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I'm gonna stop recording, or do we want to record this
Yes,
part?
yes, please stop recording now. Yes, we don't want the discussion to be recorded. Yes, thank you,
so much.
for reminding me. Yes, I saw Didre